was the New Year's Eve of last year when my brother, sister, and I lived in our parents' house. They had a big property out in the country, so even though we were all adults, we all figured it was easier just to stay home for a few more years. I was 21 at the time. We threw a big New Year's party and invited a bunch of relatives over. The few kids that were there were all having their own separate kid-friendly party in the basement, so upstairs and outside was all adults. Everyone got pretty lit, which made the traditional family stuff a lot more fun. We had a big dinner, played some party games, talked about a whole bunch of stuff, and then set up some fireworks for midnight. It was a very good night all around. After ringing in the new year, everyone who brought kids left, and the rest of us partied on for a couple more hours before everyone else went home. My family and I watched TV for a bit to wind down, but by 3, we all called it a night and went up to bed. I remember trying to pass out from the drinks I had, but whenever I tried to lay down, I just felt nauseous as hell, like I was going to throw up. I started mindlessly scrolling on my phone while sipping on some water until I sobered up enough to sleep. Then, around 4 in the morning, I started hearing noises coming from downstairs. I knew that was weird because everybody in the house should have been in bed. It wasn't like anybody was getting up for work either, as everyone had the first off. I figured it was one of my family members stumbling out of bed to get something. I was curious, so I dragged myself out of bed and crept as quietly as I could to the top of the stairs. When I looked down, I saw 2 hooded men in the living room. I panicked and ducked back behind the corner, listening to them talk.
Damn, we got loads, dude. Shh, shut up. They're gonna hear you. No way. Just look at this place. They're all probably passed out or wasted on blow or something. I mean, they literally left the door open for us. Just stop talking. You're making too much noise.
I peeked down as the more sensible one of the 2 was heading outside with a huge bag of our stuff. The other guy lagged behind, trying to fit more in his bag. A few seconds after, he was alone. I charged downstairs and grabbed him at the last second. I pulled him back into a headlock, slamming the door shut. I took one arm off him to lock the door, but he broke free. I got a hold of him again with a looser grip, which he kept fighting against.
Let me go! What the hell are you doing? This is a citizen's arrest. You're not going anywhere.
He resisted the arrest with everything he had, repeatedly trying to buck me off or get out of my grasp so he could get away. I made as much noise as possible to wake up my family, and I felt like I was winning for a moment. But then we got turned a certain way where the guy could see outside the window. We both saw his buddy get in the car and drive off without him, abandoning him. This sent the man into an absolute rage as he knew he was screwed. One moment, I had him restrained, and the next, I was suddenly being hit in the face. I staggered back, nearly falling over as I tried to keep my drunken balance. We went blow for a few minutes, but I eventually managed to overpower the intruder and got him pinned on the ground. That's when the tears started.
Please let me go. I swear we won't come back. I don't want to go back to jail. Do you get pinned down there too? Shut up, I'm scared. I don't want to go. They're gonna make me drop the soap. I'll lose my manhood.
Of course, I didn't budge for a second. No matter how much he kicked and screamed and tried to make me pity him, it took a few minutes for my family to finally wake up and call the police. And for that entire time, the burglar kept crying his eyes out. I was actually annoyed by it to the point of being pissed off. Here I was in my underwear, trying to sleep off a night of drinking, when I get woken up by some people breaking into my home, having to get into a fist fight with one of them. If anyone should have been complaining, it should have been me. Thankfully, he was mostly dried up by the time the cops arrived. I've never seen such a sad, sorry little excuse for a man like when his limp-cowering body got stuffed into the back of a cop car. He'd been to prison before apparently, and he quite obviously didn't have a good time there. I just don't get why he kept committing crimes if he was so traumatized by the consequences. He had actually robbed 2 other houses that night and barely got away. As for me and my family, things just weren't the same after that. Our childhood home had just been violated. Knowing only one of the people responsible got caught, and the other one was still out there didn't help us feel any better either. The robbery was the reason we all ended up getting our own place together, and my parents are considering selling the house. It pains me to think of it, all those childhood memories tainted in one moment by the actions of strangers. This story was inspired by a disturbing incident regarding a burglar named Aaron Good, who has been jailed following a burglary on New Year's Eve. where he was restrained and placed under a citizen's arrest after he broke into a man's house and fought him. Good, 24, from Cardiff, pleaded with the victim to release him before the officers arrived to arrest him. Good and another thief targeted a number of homes on December 31st of 2022. The first burglary occurred after he and another man gained access to a Ford Focus outside a house in Lisvane. They stole a credit card and keys to an old address. At the second address they burgled, 2 jackets worth £500 each were taken, as well as a £1,000 watch. They also stole keys to a Range Rover which they got inside of, and attempted to drive off. Good was unsuccessful at the next property where he was caught and detained by the homeowners.
I was going to a New Year's Eve party my friend invited me to. I Ubered there as I knew I would be drinking. That was the whole vibe of the party too. Everyone was just getting plastered that night, not having to worry about driving home later. Some guys were going crazy over beer pong all night, and there was a bunch of shenanigans in the pool in the backyard. People were making out and hooking up left and right, and I got hit on all night. None of the guys who hit on me were attractive, just like it usually goes. All the guys I would have wanted to hit on me must have been taken, as not a single one was inclined to interact with me. There was this one guy who was the worst out of all of them. He was this creepy bald dude who was more shit-faced than anyone. Unfortunately, he was also one of the only people who drove themselves to the party. Almost everyone else knew what they were getting into, so they got a ride one way or another. But this was one of those people who thought they could handle their liquor. I remember this guy hitting on me and saying a whole bunch of nothing. I was forced to hear a ton about his car under his loud, smelly, nasty mouth. The guy didn't look or smell like he knew how to brush his teeth, let alone take a shower. I couldn't shake him all night once he latched onto me. He wouldn't listen to me whenever I said I wasn't interested. He just pretended not to hear me.
Hey cutie, what do car crashes and hot women have in common?
I don't know.
They both get rear-ended. I'm sure you're used to that.
Yeah.
The only time I got any space was when he went to the bathroom, which luckily he did very frequently. And whenever he left, I tried as hard as I could to sneak off to a corner of the house where he couldn't find me. But he homed in on me every single time. And every time he came back, he joked about how he had broken the seal and just couldn't stop pissing. But I knew better than that. He was definitely doing something else in the bathroom. The way his eyes and face looked, it was obvious he was doing a little more than just alcohol. All night, the guy would slam back shot after shot, getting increasingly wasted. And every time he came out of the bathroom, he looked even more unhinged. It got to the point that he was no longer in control of himself. He was so trashed that he could barely speak, and he looked insane. That's also when he started crossing my physical boundaries, trying to hug me and put his arm around me. And I only let it go so far as to keep him from falling flat on his face a few times. Otherwise, I pushed him off with just as much force as he applied to me, which kept getting stronger and stronger until I reached a breaking point. I shoved him as hard as I could, screaming at him to get the hell away from me. He tumbled to the floor, and with the whole party's attention on him because of my screaming, he got laughed at by everyone. After a few attempts, he finally got back on his feet and ran over to a corner. Everyone avoided him and just kept their distance. I remember seeing him look totally distraught while crying like a drunk hobo. It was really hard to watch. He had been pushy all night, corrupting himself with more alcohol and substances until he lost control. And now all that crap in his system was making his reaction to the situation 10 times worse. Getting rejected and then humiliated by an entire house full of people had to hurt pretty bad even sober. Something got the better of me and I felt pity for him. I approached him slowly, going to put a hand on his shoulder and trying to comfort him. But before I could even touch him, he turned around screaming. He lunged for my neck and started calling me a slut and every other slur under the sun, shouting so loud that he was spitting in my face.
You bitch! How dare you reject me! I'll kill you!
It only took a few seconds for people at the party to rip him off me and kick him out. Even though he could barely walk, he still got in his car to drive away. Everyone heard the loud roar of his car starting up, and before anyone could think twice about letting him drive, he was making a U-turn to the front lawn and speeding down the street, not even capable of driving in a straight line. He disappeared around the corner, and that was the last anyone saw of him. After that, the night went on for a few more hours. We rang in the new year and kept partying, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. My mood had been ruined beyond repair despite my friends' attempts to cheer me up. About half an hour after midnight, I went home to be alone. 2 days later, my friend from the party sent me a link to a news article that made my stomach drop. There had been a fatal accident on New Year's Eve where a drunk driver smashed into somebody, killing them. The photo of the driver who got arrested confirmed beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was the same guy who harassed me and drove away from the party way too drunk to drive. I know there wasn't much I could have done, but I still feel terrible. My heart goes out to the family of the victim. This story was inspired by a horrific incident regarding a Merritt Island man who had been arrested for his role in a deadly crash on New Year's Eve. Just after 9 p.m. on December 31st, officers with the Cocoa Beach Police Department responded to a report of a crash with multiple injuries on West Cocoa Beach Causeway. According to the police department, the officers arrived to find a crash involving 2 vehicles with an extended field of debris along the roadway. In addition to the drivers, investigators say each car had 1 passenger on board. They were all taken to local hospitals to be treated. One of the passengers, identified by police as 70-year-old Pamela Morrison of Barney, Georgia, later died from injuries sustained in the crash. According to police, a preliminary examination of the crash scene indicated that a rear-end collision had occurred at a high speed. Investigators ultimately determined that one of the drivers, later identified as 36-year-old Mark Vanicola, was traveling at a reckless speed while under the influence of alcohol when the crash occurred. Vanicola was taken into custody and booked into the Brevard County Jail and charged accordingly. One of the people injured in the crash is still in critical condition at a local hospital. The police department's investigation into the sequence of events leading up to the crash is ongoing.
I'm an officer of the New York Police Department. I've been all around the city, but one place I've returned to on several occasions is Times Square on New Year's Eve. We like to keep a sizable presence there, as it's the biggest crowd we ever see. We have a perimeter of security checkpoints and patrols all around and through the area. Our goal is to prevent as many crimes from happening as possible. We keep in contact with other officers in the vicinity, but for the most part, we all stick to our own designated areas. Times Square on that specific night is like nothing else. Everyone has to stay laser focused on everything around them. One year, I got posted up right next to a security checkpoint. There were a few other officers spaced out every 30 feet or so, along the fence too. These were the guys I would be most likely to call in for backup, and vice versa. While we were still a good 2 hours from the ball drop before things got to peak intensity, I noticed a suspicious man standing on the other side of the security fence. He was about 10 feet from it, and he was staring directly at me. I thought for a moment that he was looking at someone or something else, but it became clear that wasn't the case. There were so many people passing by in a blur on both sides of the fence that I only caught glimpses of him here and there, but he never moved from the same spot, and he never took his eyes off of me. I stared back at him to let him know I wasn't intimidated, but this didn't discourage him from staring at me. On the contrary, once he knew he had my attention, he smiled. He wasn't committing any crimes at that moment, but he sure was creeping me out. So I radioed over to some other nearby officers. While I waited for them to make their way over through the crowd, I tried to seem as though I wasn't fixated on the man, but I still watched out for him. When the two of them arrived, I pointed the man out to them.
Hey, you see that guy over there?
No? Which one? Is he on this side or that side?
That side, the one staring at us.
The hell is the matter with him?
My colleague pointed over in the direction of the man, and when I looked back, I was a little shocked to see that he had made his way right up to the barrier. I got creeped out and took my eyes off him for a few seconds to keep talking.
Yeah, that guy. You think something's wrong with him?
Probably off the booger sugar. But that's not our problem.
Ah! What?
I turned around, and it was almost like the man had teleported right behind me. He kept staring at the three of us, smiling wider than ever before, but specifically looking at me. He then said,
Happy New Year's, pigs!
I stepped back out of caution, but in an attempt to keep the crowd around us from panicking, I tried to keep things calm.
Happy holidays, sir. Is everything okay?
Then, out of nowhere, the creep pulled a machete from his pants and slashed the other officer standing next to me. They dropped instantly as I reached for my weapon, but the man was so quick that he swung the machete into the side of my head. I dropped down in pain, dazed, only able to hear the pandemonium and screaming. I saw my colleague bleeding from the base of his shoulder, trying to compress the wound and get to his feet. Then, the shadow of the attacker stepped over me. He charged for my other colleague, and a few seconds later, I heard him scream too. If only I had acted quicker. If only I had drawn my weapon sooner. However, instead of going to attack others, the man returned to loom over me. He raised the machete into the air. I tried to reach for my weapon again, but it was almost like my body was moving in slow motion while the rest of the world went on around me. I thought this would be the final blow that would take me out. Just then, I heard a sound cut through the chaos. My colleague next to me had pushed through and nailed the guy right in the shoulder. He dropped his machete, stiffened up, and collapsed to the ground at my feet as 50,000 volts of electricity fried him from the inside out. I was just starting to come to as the other officers surrounded the area and arrested the psycho. All three of us that he attacked were treated at the hospital, and thankfully, none of us suffered lasting injuries. Unfortunately, I had to take several weeks off for my wounds to heal, which included a minor concussion. The treatment for a concussion is supposed to be an extended period of as little brain activity as possible, but I couldn't stop thinking about the attack the whole time. I keep blaming myself for endangering my fellow officers and the people of New York. It's hard not to feel like an inferior police officer when some random radicalized freak got the better of me. I should have arrested him the moment he appeared inside the perimeter, instead of giving him the benefit of the doubt like he was just a lost idiot. That was a mistake that could have cost many lives, including my own that New Year's night. This story was inspired by a horrific incident regarding a man who attacked 3 New York police officers with a machete on New Year's Eve in 2022. A 20-year-old man named Trevor Bickford pleaded guilty to 3 counts of attempted slaying of the officers. It was alleged that the suspect was a terroristic extremist when he brutally attacked the 3 NYPD officers who were just doing their jobs by protecting the public during the Times Square New Year's Eve festivities. Thankfully, one of the officers' quick-thinking actions stopped the defendant's attack while minimizing the risk to the innocent bystanders, who easily might have become additional victims of the defendant's heinous violence. It was alleged that Bickford entered the security area of the Times Square security checkpoint, pulled out a machete, and struck an officer with the blade and another with the handle. He then swung the blade at a 3rd officer, who ultimately subdued him. Bickford later admitted he intended to take out as many cops before becoming a martyr himself. He has since been sentenced to 27 years in prison